Beautiful Game Network. I'm Mike. With me is Kev, Josh, and our good friend John Morrissey. John is here to talk us off the edge of I don't want to say depression that I
Talk you off
primarily have
the
been.
edge. Yeah.
Talk me off the edge, and we'll sort of see where we land. Let's go. So as was so clear from the intro, I clearly am the one who is dangling off the edge with one finger here in terms of how I feel about how the season's going. So, we're thrilled to have our good buddy John at USL Tactics on Twitter back to join us once again. This feels like this has become an annual thing, which is great. We love having you on, John. What's new with you, man?
Boy, not a ton since last. Well, heck, I guess since last year I've started writing at Backheeled. I don't know if that had been a thing yet. Yeah, which I mean, I'm sure I'll plug it at the end. But we cover all things U.S. soccer. I'm the guy on the USL beat, so excited to be doing that once again for 2023.
Yeah, always great stuff. I'm sure we will talk about some of that stuff as we get into it. Josh, Kev, anything new with either of you guys? Josh, you had an exciting weekend, didn't you?
Well, I don't know if I would call it. Are you talking about the Mummy Marathon?
Yes, I'm talking about your Mummy Marathon.
Yeah, so this is becoming a new tradition, not even traditional, just like a thing that we keep on doing every month or so. The first one was a Tremors Marathon. This weekend was a Mummy Marathon. We only watched 4 movies though. We only did 1 through 3, and then the Scorpion King. Turns out there are like 5 Scorpion King movies. They all look terrible.
I have seen none of them.
So. The Rock is in the first one because he was in the second movie for the Mummy. But then after that, they just recast him and recast everyone. It's just all right, just random wrestlers and they feel like if you ever seen one of those WWE type movies where it's just random wrestlers in it and it's like an action flick, they all look like that, or a Xena Warrior Princess type feel as well. So. Yeah, we skipped those. We only did the 5 movies.
So. Josh, I'm sorry, your logic doesn't check out. They've made 5 of them, so it can't be terrible. They kept making them.
You got me there. They never make terrible franchises that never end. That never happens.
Would you say it was time well spent though this weekend?
It's always fun. I mean, the worse the movie, the more Mystery Science Theater 3000 it becomes. And then plus it's lots of junk food, snacks, hang out friends, just, have fun. So, although that does mean I miss the preseason game since I was the mumming it up. So I missed the 3-0.
It up?
The mumming. Yeah. I tried. I really tried to do that without breaking a beat, but it did not work.
That's all right. Kev, how was your weekend?
It was good. Yeah, just the Super Bowl is the only football game all year that we watched. So we get all American-fied up and just, put on the Super Bowl, made some buffalo cauliflower sandwiches and
nice.
Yeah, mozzarella sticks. It was by the end of the night, my stomach was hurting, but it was so worth it.
Did you put your Americas on?
Yes, I absolutely did. Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah. That was an Always Sunny reference where I guess when Charlie puts on his Star Spangled bandana, he calls it putting his Americas on. So
I've been watching that. I've been that's been my, washing face, brushing teeth, thing on my phone, right? When I'm just, it's because you can't be alone with your thoughts too long. Otherwise, bad stuff gets in there. So, you got to have something. And so lately that's been my, Always Sunny.
John, are you an Always Sunny fan?
I've seen a bit of it. Not my favorite of the shows, but I enjoy it. I guess it's sketchy territory in American soccer now because Wrexham is hot button. But
yeah, what is your stance on Wrexham? Because it seems like you're either behind it or you're upset that, not you personally, but people are either behind it or they're upset that it's getting so much attention because of the American owners.
I mean, I watched the show on Hulu. I think that McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds are fun people. It's only going to grow people's attention into soccer. So don't get offended if you don't know how to market your team here, maybe.
Yeah. I'm in that boat. I enjoy watching the show, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't follow them on Twitter and catch a game if it's on ESPN. So yeah, good. Well, yeah, I guess we should dive into the team news, the air quotes team news. So since we last talked, we had Justin on the show, and we took bets on when the Hounds would announce a signing. And we all said, just to spite us, they probably would announce one last week, and they did. But sad trombone, they announced a new keeper or another keeper. So
it's insulting, Mike.
Yeah,
well,
that keeper could win us the league. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I don't disagree with that, but I think in a team that there's a number of positions that are vacant right now. We would have loved to seen some other position other than keeper. I think if you look down our lineup, we're all feeling fairly confident about Jamali Waite starting as our keeper. So to announce that Christian Garner has been signed, I said it online. I hope for nothing but the best of Christian Garner. Hopefully he does turn out to be a fantastic keeper. This is the first goalkeeper that signed under new keeper coach John Bush. So who knows what that means in terms of the hierarchy, but we got a signing.
Take the podcast host filter off, Mike. Tell us how you really feel about this thing.
I am curious. I'm curious if John Bush had a lot to do with the signing, if that's his role in the club, if he is like going out there and scouting or like making that decision, or if it's more of a here's your keepers, mold them into what you need them to be, like how that works. I'd be very curious.
Yeah, it's we'll see. We had one preseason game at that point, and so they had to feel pretty good about what they had seen in preseason and in that preseason game to sign him like right away to be the first signing. So we'll see.
I guess it is pretty nice too in like preseason being able to have two keepers are going to be around just for like training purposes, right? If you're doing like 5-side or something, or just like even for someone for like Jamali Waite to like practice and train with, right? Like, so I'm finding the positives where we can, I guess.
Yeah. So that sort of segued into the Hounds had their first home preseason game of the season this past Saturday. They beat Penn State 3-0. All 3 goals came from trialists. And the reason why we can't give you the name of trialists is because the team news was that the quote was, "We also want to emphasize that the names of non-roster invitees or trialists are not used in team releases until they're under contract per team and league policy." Well, I reached out to the league today, who then referred me back to the team, and the team clarified it is not the league policy, it is the team policy. Mm-hmm. And so I have followed up with our buddy Matt Grubba to sort of say what happened, because this is the first year that policy is in place. We knew all the trialists last year, and so we'll sort of see what the team says, if there is a response. But for those who are curious, it has been a change, and it's been I guess we'll say a deliberate change. And so now we'll just need to find out why. But the starting lineup went for about 60-ish minutes. Take that for what you will, because we don't know exactly who the starting lineup was. We do know that Kizza got some minutes. So let's listen to his reaction after the game, and we can share our thoughts on that.
First preseason game here at home. A lot of you guys that are under contract got a little more extensive play than you did out of Columbus, so was it good to get a little more run out and build up toward the regular season?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a very important time for us. Just the more games you get, the more ready you are. So the more minutes everybody gets, and the better we get. So we gotta keep working, keep getting better from game to game. So coming from Columbus and playing here, doesn't matter whatever opponent you have in front of you. It's a game, so you gotta go out there and perform. So today was a good outing for everybody.
Second half today, you and a lot of the guys that started, you still stayed out there for the first 15 minutes, and it seemed like in that second half, The chances were coming a lot more. You nearly had the penalty that the offside flag took away, but then the goals started coming shortly after that. Did you feel that it just took time to grow into the game and sort of link those things up, the final third passes?
I think that's what preseason is for, because you have a number of guys that are not signed, like you said. So I think it's going to take some time to gel in whatever coach is telling us during the week. So it's going to take some time, and also you saw that in the game, first half. We had good ideas, but not as good as the second half. So second half, it's more getting on the same page, everybody getting on the same page, and I think that's the result, getting the goals in the second half. So I think that was good.
Even though the games don't count for anything, does it still feel good to get a result, get a victory?
Yeah, for sure. So coming off like a tough game in Columbus and coming home, I think we want to make this a fortress. Every time we're home, we're expected to win, and having a clean sheet, that's icing on the cake.
John, you are obviously tapped into what is going on around the rest of the league. I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts on the Dikwa versus Kiza role this year? Or what are your expectations at this point for I feel like I'm jumping ahead here, but just any thoughts on what Kiza had to say there? Anything interesting, I guess?
I mean, it was a lot of what you would expect, certainly, of like finding your feet in the preseason talk, making the home field a fortress kind of thing. It's a good mentality. I think he's someone who came on strong at the end of last season, certainly. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see both of them at times, but just given the shape of the roster right now, I mean, we'll see how things shake out. You mentioned the fact that 3 trialists, I think, were on the score sheet, so there's plenty of names to be revealed around this squad. So I think it's good that he's got that line of thinking right now, but it is very early.
Yeah, agreed. Josh, any takeaways from that?
I mean, it's just so hard to tell right now. Even people who were there talking in our Discord during the game, like they're all trying to figure out like the trial lists and like doing like Google searches with image searching and with mixed results, mostly not helping at all results. There were some sleuthing, but nothing for sure about kind of piecing together from names that Bob was screaming and that kind of stuff. I did hear one of the trialists, I think it was the one who scored first. He was getting talked to by Bob after the game, his famous post-game, lectures, and he was out there for like half an hour with Bob. So that's actually probably a good sign for him.
I was going to say,
I don't think Bob would yell at you or like talk to you that long if he was just like, well, going to cut him tomorrow. Like, why bother? So I'm maybe that's a good sign for that player. But yeah, it's
what he was being talked to like one-on-one with Bob for 30 minutes.
I mean, that's what it sounded like. It sounded like he was like still out there with him like afterwards. So like it's also like impassioned Bob though. So like at the same time you're like, oh cool, he's getting personally talked to by Bob. At the same time you're like, oh, he's yelling at that player for a long time. I feel really bad for him. It's like it's hard to tell like if it's good or bad, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Kev, any thoughts on the Hounds beating up Penn State 3-0 and 3 trialists scoring?
Not really. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I like Kiza. I didn't expect much from like his impact when we first like announced that he was coming mid-season. I was like, I don't know how much room there is for a player like him to fit in, but every time, and he was given relatively little time to make an impact, and it feels like every time he did. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to what Kiza can bring given a full season, preseason under his legs and a full season. And yeah, no, I mean, spoke well. I like the backdrop where the interview was happening. That was cool. But yeah, no, it was nice.
That was in the team's pub.
Yep,
Yeah.
the Paul Child in the background.
Yeah, sweet.
So the next Hounds preseason game is this Saturday at Highmark, 4 p.m. against Akron. Once again, it'll be open, free for anybody who wants to attend. So if you're in the area and you want to drop by, I don't know if the players are doing high fives after the game for the fans. Maybe just have your phone out and just film everybody that walks past, and then we can go back through and see who was there. yeah, maybe this whole thing was a ploy by the team to just make it a game for the fans to try to figure out who's in camp and who's not, and then they'll just announce everybody like the week before. It's like we signed 12 people, and you just have to guess who they are.
I'd be down with that if they told us that's what they were doing. It's like, look, we've already signed everyone, but we're not going to tell like 2 weeks before the season, and then like have this big unveiling.
Ammo comes out in like a Riddler outfit and just starts giving clues.
Yeah. I'm slightly more pessimistic that that's why they're doing things, but I'm more pessimistic in general. So, John, let's get to it. I am feeling pessimistic about this team this year. You obviously pay a lot of attention to what's going around, not just in the East, but in the entire USL. How are you feeling about the Hounds at this point in the preseason?
I think confused and pessimistic has captured a lot of what I felt over the course of the offseason, just in terms, and I'm sure you guys have laid it out for the past couple months, of a lot of very talented players leaving. Really, I mean, forget about Garner. You've only brought in Joey Farrell, who is an excellent player. He was probably the only good defender in a pretty shambolic Phoenix team for a lot of last season. But in a year when the East especially has seen improvement across the board, arguably at every other club, for Pittsburgh to do what they've done this offseason has been a little bit baffling. They've got the second least announced players at this point, bottom 10 in terms of the minutes played last season that have been kept around. I think that there is an expectation around the league that, and you're showing the chart now, it illustrates that Pittsburgh has kept, or rather only added about, in terms of the roster makeup, 15% of it or so is new players. But in terms of minutes retained, it's very low. So you've kept a decent amount of guys, but the guys you've kept have been role players. If you think about like Amar Ibarra, Nathan Dos Santos, that kind of guy who got some spot minutes, but wasn't necessarily like the player to really make a difference. It's really a zag of an approach where a lot of teams have recruited high-end USL players, looked to the CPL or MLS Next Pro, and taken a lot of high-profile talent. And it kind of seems like Bob Lilly just wants to say, we'll pluck some college kids, we'll sign some trialists late on and turn them into contributors, which could be a valid approach. I'm not going to count that out, but it just feels like it's not where the league has been trending overall.
You mentioned, some of the other teams doing other things. When you look across at least the East, because that's what, I mean, we are going to be playing all the teams in the West, but when you look across the East, who has impressed you? Who do you think is like building a team that's going to make a run and maybe surprise some people?
I mean, in terms of a team that has gone from strength to strength and had a busy offseason, the Tampa Bay Rowdies stand out, where, I mean, they did lose like Sebastian Guenzati, Jake LaCava rather went off to MLS, but they brought in Cal Jennings, who scored goals for fun with Las Vegas. Forrest Lasso, 3-time Defender of the Year, is back in their back line. Really every area of the pitch they've strengthened. And then you're showing the chart now of the number of players that each team has signed with, according to my model, the points that you would expect those players to add. Tampa Bay, second best in the league. Indy 11, who missed the playoffs last year, but brought in and Aiden Quinn, Guenzati, and Cam Lindley, 3 all-league level guys. They have had probably the best offseason of anybody out there. Across the board, really, the East has been active. You're seeing Charleston as the third best offseason by that model, where they brought in the defending coach of the year. They brought in a lot of guys from Memphis, some unsung players from the West, who are just really good talents. So to see the teams that missed the playoffs really strengthen and then have Pittsburgh spin their wheels a little bit is probably the main reason for concern if you are a Riverhounds fan.
I could keep going asking questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Josh and Kev. Like, ask away. Thoughts on the Hounds this year?
It just kind of feels like this is like we've seen this chatter online as far as other media who cover the Hounds, that this is kind of like rinse and repeat for us. It's like everyone panics, and then it turns out that Bob knows what he's doing, and he signs a bunch of college kids, or like players who maybe didn't get into MLS like they were hoping to once MLS season starts, and he like picks up some good players who are underappreciated, and then we make a playoff run like always. Like, do you feel like that's most likely the outcome, or do you think this is different than most seasons?
So what I a couple weeks back put out my like season preview piece hub thing. I had Pittsburgh last in the conference, and I've been reconsidering, and I've got them 9th and right on the bubble just because I'm buying into that whole rhetoric of they're not going to let this team be bad. They know what they're doing. There's a track record of bringing in players late. I do think that this offseason has been different stylistically, where if you look at last year, you basically lost Vidiello and Todd Wharton, who, again, were big players, important players, certainly, but it's different when it's Dixon and Cicerone and Wheat and so many of those high-end, borderline all-league types, and you're not really replacing them, where even last season, and say what you will about what Dane Kelly did, but when you brought him in, you expected someone who was going to be a top-end contributor. So I do think that things are a little different, and that's why I have Pittsburgh on the borderline knife's edge of the playoffs right now.
I need your help settling something here. Last week, we got into a discussion about Danny Griffin, and I was really upset that Danny Griffin was not with the team. And Kevin was like, he was okay. And I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? Losing Danny Griffin as our pivot is just like, who's going to play our pivot role?
Let me defend it a little bit. I appreciate no one got more minutes than Griffin last year.
The previous 3 years or 2 years,
heavily relied on by Lily. But I thought he played his role well, was reliable, and his role wasn't like, I would say, like even the most important role in the team. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not that I think he was bad. I think he was good. It was just that he was like, he was reliable. He was solid, and he kept the team ticking over. But like, I don't know. I don't think he was like the most important player. I don't know.
Yeah. So numbers wise, my model has him as like a top 20% player each of the last 2 years across the USL.
Get off the
I think watching him, the strength of his game is the stuff that is a little bit more subtle. The way that he positions himself, he's always there to kind of slow down an opposing counter, set the tempo for a River Hounds attack. I think something that speaks to the reputation that he has is he was really the first player that it's Huntsville who signed him, right? He was basically the first player they targeted. And while they just announced his move, he'd been signed there for probably 3 months at this point. Like Liam Doyle and Jack Collison, 2 veteran USL figures who are running that team, made it a priority to get him in as the guy to set the culture. And I think that just says a lot about the impact he has and the regard that he carries around this sport.
Interesting. Thanks, John. Appreciate that insight there.
Get him, John.
We talked a lot about sort of how the Hounds go about doing things, and you mentioned Lily sort of doing his thing, and how you've sort of talked your way from 12th to 9th. But at the end of last season, you also put out your like coaches rankings, and you had Lily in sort of that. It wasn't in the top tier; it was like second tier. But the phrase that stood out to all of us, not because we disagreed with it, that wasn't it at all, but was just sort of the "What have you done for me lately?" So, what is your view? I mean, we watch a lot of games, and it seems like the announcers are always just sort of singing Lily's praises, but a lot of what is said is reflective of years past. And it is a lot of like, the past few years, it's been, we make it to the playoffs and we're done. So that's good. That's a lot better than where we were before he got here. But, are we building a playoff team, or are we building a championship team? So just what's your thoughts on Lily versus, it seems like there's just a constant churn of new coaches that are coming in and making an impact. And, especially with, coach of the year now moving to the Battery. And Just thoughts in general on all of that.
I do think that in terms of the what have you done for me lately line of thinking, getting that playoff win goes a long way for me in terms of showing that there is a little bit of life and vivacity. And Lily is never someone who's resting on his laurels and refusing to change. I think within a season, you'll see him try so many different tactics, so many different systems. And he's not afraid to cut off someone like a Dane Kelly and turn to players that are consistently producing. So that's a feather in his cap. I think that he does have a frustrating tendency to tinker a little bit too much. I think there are times where he can sort of shell up and refuse to play a positive brand of soccer when he can go for the kill. And I think to a certain extent, you saw that in the Louisville game. I believe in what he's doing, but I think if Pittsburgh falls flat on their face this year, which is a real possibility, it might be time to start thinking long and hard about where is he at in the state of the USL in 2023 going forward.
It's funny because like I had a question lined up that kind of goes completely against that, where we always hear people saying like when MLS teams need a coach, like is it possible Lily gets called up to MLS or anything like that? And like I guess the thought also though is the situation Lily in a problem with his style, or is it Pittsburgh doesn't have as much money as some of the other clubs, and maybe it's that type of situation. Like, could you see Lily being successful at a different club? Like, I'm thinking MLS, like, or is he kind of where he belongs as far as quality goes?
And I could be completely off base, but the vibe I get around Lily is that he's a little bit of hardcore would probably be the wrong word, but he's very intense. He's very top-down controlling in terms of who he's playing, how the roster is developed. And I think MLS is a little bit less accepting of a manager with a complete top-down vision. And so I think that the USL is kind of built for his style of game. And I think that the success that he's had over the years of turning those college kids into contributors, kind of finding those diamonds in the rough, is built for a team with a lower budget. That said, I think that there is a value in getting some fresh faces in there at a certain extent. I know I've referenced Charleston a couple of times where they had Mike Anheuser in there for 20, 25 years, and they completely fell flat on their face last season when they brought in Connor Casey, but they recognized that they needed someone with a consistent vision, a track record to go in a new direction. And I don't think that there's a team that people are thinking as highly of as the Battery right now. So different strokes. They saw a change from the president down, including Pyramid coming in. And I don't know if Pittsburgh's ready for that kind of change, certainly. I mean, I love what Jeff Garner is doing in his track record across the league, certainly. But Lily is just a big question mark for me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Kev, any thoughts on all of this? Where do you stand on things?
I mean, I agree that I think this year is a big year for him. If you look back at his track record, now like this isn't in my memory banks. I'm looking off, a webpage, but the season before Lily comes in, we finished 13th, and then he turns it around and we finished third. The season that he comes in, and then we finished first, and that so like third, first, third, and then fifth. So I think this season, if he's closer to that fifth, or if he's closer to that third first, is the kind of determining factor of like what the near-term future of Lily will be. I think the other thing is, I don't know. I know Louisville and Tampa to some extent have made it look easier than what I'm going to suggest that it is, but I think on some level it's easier and more straightforward to control like where you finish in the league than it is playoffs. Like playoffs, anything can happen. So if I'm looking at a manager who can consistently get me close to finishing top of the conference, then that's what I mostly care about. I understand and appreciate there's probably an art to leading a team into the playoffs that you can say some managers have or some managers don't have. But I think I'm still leaning towards the thing of like, look, playoffs are playoffs. They're one-off games. Anything can happen. Maybe we've been a bit unlucky over the past, over Lily's tenure. So I'll put more weight on where we finished in the conference. So yeah, it's, will this be a third year running where we, finish fifth or something, or are we going to bounce back and finish, top three? I think that'll be the big kind of deciding factor for me about where I feel about and how I feel about Lily going forward.
This might be a question for everyone, but kind of going off that, do you think that us finishing fifth but getting farther in the playoffs is a bigger deal, or do you think us finishing close to the first and then going out in the playoffs the same way we have been, which is after the first round? Like, what would you think would be better for not just the club, but for like Lily and like our image?
I'll quickly answer that. I think the first and then crashing out of the playoffs, I think that's really demoralizing and can be hard to bounce back from. That being said, I think it's probably better for I don't know.
Right?
It's demoralizing when that happens, and that could be hard. Because that also affects like your club image across the league. But I think if you're consistently finishing near the top and then unlucky bounces, like the freaking Super Bowl last night. Anyway, then it's a little more difficult.
I think in terms of what the team is going to do, I think it's going to be whatever puts butts in seats. So I think if we end the season and, the top of the East and all season long, they can say that we're the number one team in the East and that's selling tickets. That's what's going to make the club happy. And that's just that's what they're there to do, is to put butts in seats. If we flame out in the playoffs, then they can always just say, oh, it's the playoffs. It's one and done. We feel really bad. We're looking forward to another great season. Come on back next year and, increase the prices on season tickets. So I also, being a fan of European style soccer, football, I put more stock in ending the season number one, because you played everybody twice and, we're playing some teams out west, and that just sort of shows a resiliency over the course of the year. But John, I'm interested. What are your thoughts? Like, would you rather see, it doesn't necessarily have to be Pittsburgh, would you rather see a team finish first and then flame out in the playoffs, or, fifth and make a run into the championship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the single table, play everyone. That is sort of a better indicator of how good you are. And I think just threading the needle on that last question into this, if Lily takes this roster that feels a little bit raw and a little bit light and turns it into a team that competes at the top of the table, that's the sort of thing that tells me he's very much still got it as a player identifier and someone who can develop talent into something useful. And I think that's very meaningful going forward, as compared to like a sneaking into the playoffs Cinderella run, sort of getting lucky. Almost feels like kicking the tires. And at the end of the day, you guys have hit on the important point that whatever is better for building soccer in Pittsburgh is ultimately what you want out of this. But from the more outside perspective of how do I grade out what's the direction of the River Hounds, I think that high finish in the regular season probably is a better outcome.
Kevin mentioned, sort of landing somewhere in the top three. As you sort of look around the East, you put us at 9th, which is understandable. We haven't really signed anybody, so it's hard to judge this team. Who are your top 3, 4, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on Tampa Bay. They're always good, and they've probably gotten stronger. I don't need to put a ton of breath there. And ditto for Louisville, who they lost Corbin Bone to retirement, but he played like 10 games, and they replaced him with Dylan Mayers, who's one of the best midfielders in the USL and has been for years. Again, I do think if they have a weakness, it's going to be that Josh Winder is not long for Louisville and is going to get sold off to Europe for like $2 million, and they only have 2 center backs on the roster otherwise. So they need to add there. But if your biggest issue is you're going to sell somebody for $2 million, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
Memphis finished 3rd last year, and they lost Pierman. They lost a couple role players. They didn't sign Jeremy Kelly, their leading assister, until this week. But now he's back. They stole Bruno Lapa from the rival Birmingham Legion, and they've gotten a decent defensive core back together, pretty much all on multi-year contracts. So they went from a position of weakness, probably at the beginning of the offseason, to a team that might be a little bit better than last year when they kind of tore the league apart, surprisingly. So they feel good. I referenced Birmingham. They're very thin. They're another team with only two central defenders. Both of their starting fullbacks might be kids straight out of college. Losing Johnny Dean is a big deal. Their attacking depth is worse off. The thing is, they've added with star power. So bringing Nico Brett in at striker, obviously a familiar face for Pittsburgh fans. And then in a negative sense, Tyler Pasher would be a familiar face as well. Yeah.
Josh,
he was solid enough in MLS. Obviously didn't really stick there, but you remember what he did in this league. He's going to be fantastic for them. So the top four kind of feels like it's going to be about the same as it was last year. And then the question marks begin. I hit on Indy. I think Tulsa has had an underrated offseason. They've not really added anyone with much USL experience, but it's the cream of the crop in the Canadian League in MLS Next Pro. So they're interesting at a minimum, and they haven't really lost any of their good players. I've been on the warpath a little bit with Detroit City Twitter saying that they're going to drop off quite a bit. Declan Wynn, who led all defenders in assists, I believe, and then Antoine Hopino, who led the entire league in assists, are both gone. Their second leading goal scorer is gone, and they've kind of added nobody. They've announced their trialists, though, which I guess is a leg up on the River Hounds.
But they play behind closed doors. They never they only play their preseason behind closed doors. So, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it seems like they're just going to run back another batch of players from NISA that were like the greatest hits of Detroit circa 2019. I don't really understand the logic there, but go off Trevor James. So that's sort of the lay of the land in terms of who's in Pittsburgh's neighborhood. Oh, I guess I should reference Miami. I feel like we always forget about Miami. No one really cares that they exist, but they're going to be okay again, I guess.
So Mike, grab that audio clip when we play Miami in the season.
Great. Nobody cares about Miami. So that leaves me with two questions, John. So first of all, I think the two teams that I'm most interested in your opinion as to whether or not you think they'll finish above the Hounds are Detroit and Birmingham, just because it feels like the past few seasons we've really liked to rub Birmingham's nose in it when we get to the playoffs. And are they going to be rubbing our nose in it this year? So what are your thoughts on just those three teams and how they finish?
So in order, I've got Birmingham ahead of Pittsburgh right now. I think an injury in the midfield or their defense could really wreak some havoc, but they have oodles of attacking talent and they're imbalanced in that way, but I think they have enough there to figure it out and come with a strong finish. Pittsburgh would come next for me. I think they're just a better team in terms of those top end guys versus Detroit. Let's be real when we're thinking about what the River Hounds have right now, which is still Canardo Forbes and Robbie Mertz and Dikwa and Ordonez and Joey Fair. Like, there's really a good spine for this team if they can just fill out the depth a little bit versus Detroit, who made the playoffs as the very last team in. If you look at the expected goals numbers, they overperformed by a lot. They're going to be missing Devin Amu-Mensah to start the season, who still hasn't recovered from his injury, and they've lost 3 of their best 5 players, probably. That's not a convincing offseason. I have them out of the playoffs, and I think that they're rather unlikely to get there, and they can prove me wrong on that, but I would take the Hounds if I'm picking one of the two.
If they prove you wrong, don't worry, they'll let you know.
They're very good at that, yeah.
And as long as we have Kiza, I'm just saying, for Birmingham, I mean, we have Kiza, the Birmingham Dream Killer himself, so I think we'll be fine.
You just beat him on penalties in the first round of playoffs.
That's right. Yeah. My other question, because you sort of ranked your top 4, 5, 6 in the East. Yeah. Is it your sense that the level, the overall level of those teams is pretty much similar to what it was last year, or do you get the sense that all of them have improved year over year, and so it's not just that we need to sort of get to their level from last year; we need to go above and beyond that to even have a fighting chance?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I feel like every single team in the conference, barring Pittsburgh and Detroit, has demonstrably improved this offseason. I know I mentioned the reasons with like Tulsa and Indy. Miami even basically lost no one, added a couple guys with MLS experience or all league caliber League One players. Hartford added Antoine Hopino and Elvis Amo when what they lacked last season was really consistent creation and attack. They've plugged the holes that they needed to plug. Loudon is weird because Loudon and the partnership and all of that, but they've added at least some interesting players that could feasibly get them closer to competitive than they were. And when you're losing the free points that were New York and Atlanta, suddenly every game takes on a little bit more significance where if the bottom end of the East is really that tightly packed, you have to be getting at least a draw in a lot of these games or you're just losing ground. And that's the fact of the matter. And so I think you've hit, that's the crux of why I think this has been a bit of a worrying offseason.
If, what would have to change for you to, say that the Hounds came out and announced a slew of player signings this week? What would cause you to sit up and go, oh, maybe I should bounce the Hounds further up the table in terms of how I think they're going to finish? Like, is there a specific position or a type of player? Kev, go ahead.
I was going to say, to give you some time, John, to think about that. Like, I don't know. Like, this is why I don't have a strong formulated opinion on signings this offseason, because we bucked the trend last year and brought in Dane Kelly, something that I would say is unusual for Lily and the Hounds. We're like, great, this is going to, we're doing something different. This is going to change things. And, we all know how it turned out. So I'm left a little bit of like, I don't know where he's going to find impact from, given how specific Lily needs his players to play in his system or something. So yeah, I know it's not a great answer for like a podcast thing, but me personally, it's one of those things, like, until the season kicks off, I have no idea. Like, we could bring in someone who's like, putting up goals everywhere and just doesn't work out. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sold on the striker spot right now between Dikwa and Keza. I think Dikwa certainly proved that he can be a double-digit scorer in this league, and Keza came on strong at the end. You don't need more than two decent forwards, really, unless you have some terrible injury luck. And likewise, I'm pretty sold on the more attacking half of the midfield with the Mertz, the Forbes of it all. It's the spine of this team defensively where I'm a little bit worried of. I think Mark Ibarra is good. Is he a starting level number 6 or number 8? That's certainly a question mark. So getting someone in that spot would do a ton for the balance. And I think that's why the Danny Griffin loss hurts more than anything.
Yeah, it does hurt.
It doesn't. Yeah. No, it doesn't.
I do think if you're just using two center backs, there is hardly a better pair than Joey Farrell and Arturo Ordonez. And you need another body there if you want to use the back three or just to have the surety of depth. But it's the wide areas, I think, are the most pressing concern, where Rivera, Dos Santos, Biasi, they're fine. But no one is really inspiring me in those spots. No one is really going to force a team. If you're Pittsburgh attacking, the opposing defense can really just center in, crush up towards the middle of the pitch and try to clog everything for Mertz and Forbes and deny their lanes. So getting some tertiary creation out there not only just strengthens the team, but gives you a bit more flexibility if Lily wants to tinker. So add a center back, add a number 6, get a winger or two. And even if these are just replacement level USL guys, I think I'm going to be seeing the vision in a lot more of a thorough way with what Pittsburgh's doing.
It's fair.
This is a little bit of like a throwback question to like everyone, but even though like Dixon put up good numbers last year, I'm somewhat, I don't know, I'm of the opinion that Lily almost doesn't know how to use a player like Dixon. Like Dixon, he would play at like wing back and then he would play forward, and I always thought that he was like the best player on the field, and I almost expected him to get more numbers than he did, even though the numbers he put up were good. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like that's an interesting point, and I agree. But I just made me. I was like, yeah, Dixon, and put up good numbers, but I was like, I almost felt like he just kept shuffling Dixon around, and didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I was a staunch defender of his. I think the first season he was here, I think there were flashes during the game where you could tell that skill wise and even at times just sort of game reaction wise, he seemed to be head and shoulders above everyone else. You have him, you have Cicerone, where there were rumors that Cicerone felt like he wasn't being used properly, and that's part of the reason why he started to look elsewhere. So I think that's one of the reasons why I was higher on this team last season was we had some of that senior depth to fill in the gaps, and we knew that those guys were versatile enough that they could play in a couple of different positions, and we don't have that experience this year. That experience might come from, some MLS guys that sort of fall out, but we also haven't had a ton of luck with MLS guys that fall out. Like, the past few years, we picked up a few guys here and there and they either get injured or they just don't work out. So
I will say too, to second, like to kind of add another dimension to the conversation around like signings, almost forgetting about position for a second. I know this is like Canaro Forbes has been amazing, incredible career. And I still think he has a lot to add to this team. And I know he's the captain, but he's a certain kind of leader that I think we could use a different kind of leader in the team as well. Like, I don't know, like Kenny's one of those silent leaders who like, let me show you what I can do that you can't kind of thing. Whereas I think sometimes we need a leader who's like, when the chips are down, will galvanize the troops. And, I think we've been lacking that in the past couple, like Cicerone maybe, but like he would just get like frustrated and angry and just like push harder rather than like galvanize. So I would love to see
that could be new Joe.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I think he's someone with tenure at the highest levels of this league with what he did in Phoenix. He's a veteran. He's certainly a little bit more fiery and vocal. So I think that he's going to be someone who's going to be felt on the pitch in terms of his play, but in what he does, communicating and organizing this team in a really vocal sort of way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Anytime
like
it comes,
you're still in the depths. We're trying.
I know. No, anytime you talk about like who's going to be the vocal leader, I'm like, that's Bob. Like anybody that's going to yell on the field is just going to be competing with Bob. So I think that's why Kenny's just kind of like, I got it. Don't yell at me. I know what you want. I'm just going to go do it.
And you think Kenny comes in the back, like after Bob's yelling, and then like Kenny comes up afterwards and like talks to the player and be like, this is what he's trying to say without being so raised. Like, really, you're doing great, kid.
It's okay. Just stand over there and run when I say run, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I have an important question because I saw your thread about Rihanna songs for USL teams, and you did not mention the Riverhounds in there at all. And I have a suggestion. It would be Umbrella, because Pittsburgh actually gets the most rain/snow days than any other USL club.
Really?
City. Yeah. I just looked it up. I was listening the whole time, I swear, but I was also looking up statistics for rain because I thought we had the most. And I think Cleveland gets more than us, Seattle gets more than us, but that's about it as far as like cities with clubs. So yeah, Umbrella. I'm just saying it works.
Hey, I'm here for it.
That's one of my favorite Rihanna songs anyway, so that works out really well. Good call, Josh. Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's talk a little bit just not about the Hounds, John, because we tend to spend a lot of time just talking about the Hounds. What teams are you most excited about in the East? What matchups are you most excited to see in the East? Just general thoughts.
Yeah, matchup wise, I don't know dates or anything, but whenever Charleston and Memphis square off, the Ben Bierman Bowl is going to be a fun one early on. I think Hartford against Detroit, just to see Hopino take it to his old club, is going to be something interesting. This could be a fun year for the Louisville Indianapolis Proximity Association football contest, given that the 11 are going to be decent again and the whole Dylan Mayers of it all. So I think there's some good like rivalries of we signed one of your legendary players or your hot young coach this season that's going to really add some intrigue in the East.
Guys, is there, from a Hounds perspective, I can't remember if we talked about this or not. What one team are you most looking forward to seeing come to Highmark from the East? I won't make you look through the West schedule at all. Josh, who do you love seeing here?
I mean, it's. I feel like it's same answers as always, but like, I like the Louisville Pittsburgh thing. I want us to be more than the little brother in that competition. I want us to feel like we bring it just as much. But also, this whole thing with Detroit and the fact that neither team has won against each other yet in regular season, I'm still excited for that game because until there's actually been a winner in one of these matches, it's like kind of like tensions building. So
I feel like, Kev, I'll come to you in a second. I feel almost like for a while we fashioned ourselves to be a competitor to Louisville at the top, and now I feel like we've shaken off that. Like we're now like Detroit, Birmingham, like that's like our zone, and Louisville
I think it was
is
the
more
past 2
focused on
years.
Tampa, and yeah.
3-4 years ago, yeah, we 4 years ago we finished above Louisville, and so like it's not ridiculous to say that, but it is a little bit now.
But now it's aspirational. You know what I mean? Like you're right. That it doesn't feel like every time we play them, like, oh no, what's going to happen? It's more like, I hope we beat them because it'd be so cool, and like kind of like building up that tension, and not tension. It's just a rivalry. It's like there could be one there.
Liz just said, I don't get an opinion with my attitude this year. Thanks, Liz.
Speaking truth. Yeah,
we'll have you on the show and you can share your opinion. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else? Any other questions here, guys, for John while we have him?
I mean, I got my Rihanna question in, or statement. That was that's all I really had.
All I can figure otherwise is Rude Boy with Bob Lilly yelling at players after. That's
good. That's actually good. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a good one.
Well, John, as always, we love having you on. Before we get out of here and sort of do our wrap up, why don't you tell everyone where they can find your stuff and follow you on the socials?
Yeah, I'm too wordy with the plugs at this point, but USL Tactics on Twitter, the USL Show podcast, obviously every week on Tuesdays, and then Backheeled, which the big thing is we're moving to a subscription model. So if you read my, it's like $5 a month. If you read my weekly power rankings, those end up running like 5,000 to 6,000 words every single week. So if you need like 20,000 words of writing about the USL for $5 a month, it's a good deal. And we've got podcasts, we've got coverage of the national teams, everything US soccer. So I think it's worth your money. I'll still be doing the Twitter thing if not. So just check out whatever I'm doing.
For sure. Absolutely go check it out. We asked you last time you were on, and I don't think it's changed. Do you sleep? Because like you just constantly provide a crazy amount of content. Blows my mind.
I guess in the past year I've also like started working a real human adult job and continuing to do the soccer thing. So yeah, the sleep is still minimal, but I'm living.
Well, we appreciate all the work you put into it. Guys, just a few closing things. We're less than a month away from the season starting on March 11th, which really means only 3 more episodes for us after this. I keep saying like, we've got time. We don't have time. Like the season's here. And so, which makes me all the more nervous. But I will add the caveat. I feel like I'm adding this every show. I don't want people to think that, my demeanor about the team is a personal attack on Bob Lilly. I think Bob is great. I love talking to Bob. I'm more talking as a fan and my perspective on the club overall and wanting the club to succeed and do well. So I'm not here saying Lilly out. Nobody wants to see anybody lose their job. Everyone just wants to see the team and the club succeed. So that's sort of my disclaimer.
I think we need a bit more edge on this podcast anyway. We've been too fluffy and supportive and nice all this while. So yeah,
I'm not saying I'm not going to bring the edge. I'm still going to bring the edge. I'm just going to add the caveat that like I don't want to see anybody lose their job. Like I just, can we make this work somehow, please? And again, prove me wrong, please. I want you to prove me wrong. I want to come on this show and say I was wrong because the Hounds are the top team in the East and they're crushing in the playoffs. nothing would make me happier than to say I was wrong. So, yeah.
Do you use this tactic a lot in the rest of your life, where you're just
No.
like, you know, like Susan, like you're not going to do the dishes and just like walk out of the room, like prove me wrong,
prove me wrong, prove me wrong.
No, I do not. I do not do that anywhere else. Yeah. One last thing. Last week we talked about how we're going to introduce a new game. Basically, before each game, we will host a pick'em. We will finalize the details of how and where people can submit their picks. But if you participate all season, whoever gets the most points, so you get 3 points if you pick the score exactly. You get 1 point if you at least pick the winner or draw, and 0 points otherwise. Whoever has the most points at the end of the season, what we had asked was if we only made it available to supporters of the show, and it's a $10 basically, donation to the show. Would people be interested in doing that if it meant that we gave away 2 season tickets to the Steel Army section in 2024? And the results online were a resounding yes. So we're going to do that. We're still working out the details of how people can submit their picks. We're going to try to make it something very simple. But as of Tuesday morning, which depending upon when you listen to this might be now, if you go over to YouTube, we're /@Mongols on YouTube. Go to the community section. There'll be a post there that has a link. Click the link. You can donate your $10 and you are in. If you are part of our Twitter circle already, you are also in. You don't have to go and donate another $10. We did that late last season and we said that would carry over to this season. But the idea will be that prior to every game, and we'll talk about it on the show and we'll have updates as to like who's winning and all of that. But whoever makes it to the end of the season in that top spot will walk away with 2 season tickets to the Steel Army section for 2024, which is a pretty sweet deal for $10. Plus you get to play all season. And we're talking about a few other little freebie fun things that we're going to do just for supporters as well over the course of the year. So go check that out. We'll post it on Twitter as well, because we know there's still people on Twitter. Even though it was ironic that we talked about like, should we move? And then like Twitter was like, no one can tweet. So go to YouTube. That's where a lot of the core stuff will be. We'll also share it on Twitter and go from there. So, but stay tuned for more details. Otherwise, anything else, guys, you guys want to talk about? We're good? Awesome. John, thanks again. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for listening and hanging out. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk to you all very, very soon.
Cheers.
Later.
Peace.